The regular scheduled broadcast of the Charter Commission Government Structure Work Group will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Charter Commission's Government Structure Work Group. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota statutes, section 13D.021, due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Jill Garcia, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Charter Commission's Government Structure Work Group. I will now call this meeting to order and ask that the clerk call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Ginder.
Present.
Commissioner Mecki.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Clegg.
Here.
Co-chair Abbott.
Here.
Co-chair Garcia.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Let the record reflect we have a quorum. We will now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Commissioners, the copy of the agenda for today's meeting is before us. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved, Abbott.
Second, Mecki.
Thank you. Is there any discussion before the clerk calls the roll? Not seeing any discussion. I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Ginder.
Aye.
Commissioner Mecki.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Clegg.
Aye.
Co-chair Abbott.
Aye.
Co-chair Garcia.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
And the motion passes. The agenda is adopted. And the next item, and only item on our agenda, is to receive and file responses from the mayor about the agreed upon concepts and initial draft amendment about the government structure for the city of Minneapolis. As we proceed, I will go through the questions that were presented to the mayor, and we will then entertain any other questions or comments the mayor has, and perhaps there may be some time for additional questions of the charter commissioners and the commissioners and the work group members to the mayor. So I would like to welcome you, Mayor Fry. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I can only imagine how busy your schedule is, so welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Chair Garcia and commissioners. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today.
Thank you. Shall we dive right into the questions? For those listening, the first is that, as you know, Mayor Fry, the Charter Commission is considering potential amendment that would clarify and define the roles and responsibilities for city governance based on a legislative council and executive mayor. So speaking from your own experiences, how might that proposal improve the current structure? And also, how might it create unforeseen negative drawbacks?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for the opportunity to engage on this very important conversation that I know all of you on the Charter Commission have been working very carefully and diligently to consider how these changes to the very sacred document that is our city charter may be reflected in code, and how these changes could potentially impact both government relations and accountability going forward. And so I know that you've all been sifting through our city's history and interviewing stakeholders, council members, staff, and approaching this topic with the diligence that it most certainly deserved. And having served as both a council member and now as mayor, I do hope that my perspective can be helpful in this discussion around how our local government can operate successfully. The first area is accountability. One of the biggest issues I've observed is that the city's current structure is in so many respects disjointed. There's no reason that any business or government would voluntarily and independently set themselves up in a way that we presently are. Our system does not provide for a clear line of accountability, not for constituents, not for our partners, not for our departments. And there is a highly diffused structure that we have in place, and that means that the buck never really stops with one elected official. Instead, it just gets passed around from person to person, round and around, with really no clear accountability for decision-making or government performance, whether it's good or bad. And that's a feature of the charter. And so I understand your proposal would, as I understand it anyway, it would delineate council's responsibility for policymaking, for legislation, for local legislative work, from the mayor's responsibility for the very day-to-day work, the executive function of implementing, of enforcing laws and ordinances, and then of reporting on the performance. And that model would be closer to what we do see in many other jurisdictions around the country, certainly in larger cities. And I do believe it would stand to strengthen both sides of the core governance structure. I'll note briefly the engagement that you did with department heads and former elected officials also highlights the very same challenge that I've outlined. And it's simply put, when roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, divergence between policy makers is natural in a healthy democracy. However, when clear roles and responsibilities are not well defined, that conflict in perspectives can lead to really serious breakdowns in enterprise operations. And I think we see that in forms of government in the city of Minneapolis, not unique to any one administration or council. I feel that divergence has been throughout and is highlighted even more. I'm not going to provide too many examples, but the truth is all 14 policymakers agree on overarching priorities in the city of Minneapolis. And we took a whole lot of time to go through missions and goals. And yes, we are very much on the same page with respect to that. But when we get into the operationalizing, the implementation of those goals, so much time is spent on specific management level decisions that the overall goals can often get lost, and we move inefficiently towards solutions. And that's on everything from affordable housing, which requires very complex cost-benefit decisions, not only about where to dedicate financial resources, but also on how to direct the limited staff time and energy that we have at the city. And that limited staff time and energy is even more limited during times of a pandemic and economic downturn and cuts to our government system. A new policy may engender goodwill from advocates, but when balanced against other options, the actual goal of ensuring affordable housing for all might be diminished. Finally, I think that this type of change actually aligns with most residents' general impression of how the city does operate. I'd be happy to delve into that further.
Thank you, Mayor Fry, and we may come back to that. What would you include in the roles and responsibilities of a legislative council, as well as of an executive mayor?
Chair Garcia, just to make sure I understand your question correctly, you're saying, what roles would I deem a council to have if it is a truly and exclusively legislative function, and the mayor is truly and exclusively an executive function? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Are there roles and responsibilities between the two that can be more clearly delineated?
Sure. I think the answer is yes. It is at many times disjointed, and to me, the council essentially has like about 3 to 4 primary responsibilities. That's to, of course, make the laws, make the ordinances and the public policies of the city. And they are uniquely and well set up to deliberate, to analyze the measures of how a law would impact the city for the long term, and then ultimately pass that law. They're set up to oversee and check the executive function and the administration in terms of performance and service delivery, and whether that's through an audit or just the normal check and balance between an executive and a legislature. They approve the budget, and they retain that traditional power of the purse through, the mayor proposes the budget, and then the city council amends that budget. And I think that is a proper function. And then finally, they represent their constituencies. They help facilitate positive outcomes on some of the very basic functions of government, interactions with our city, to be, a liaison and assist where they can. And I think those are very significant and important roles, and the council should have the time, and I'll add the resources, and I do support them in getting those resources to perform those responsibilities. So while I appreciate and do agree with the need for centralized accountability and one executive and one elected by the people, I also value the role that the council plays. I was a council member, and I understand the role in holding an executive accountable and that balance of power. And I understand that, and understand the need to balance that efficiency with oversight and then good policy process. And in so many ways, our legislative process should not be an overriding goal. In fact, the process that they go through, the very deliberative process, sometimes it should be slow. It should be considered. That's the very nature of how you get to good legislation and policy decisions, and that should also be the forum for where community engagement takes place. That's not to say that the mayor or the executive shouldn't be involved in community engagement, but certainly the council process and the ability to have public hearings is uniquely situated to be able to intake input in a formal fashion.
Thank you. I think I will jump to question 4. As that is a little related. And question 4 is...
Madam Chair, I apologize. I didn't. I talked about sort of the legislative function. I don't know if you wanted me to talk about the executive function as well. I don't mean to interrupt.
I'm sorry. Of course. Please, Mr. Mayor, continue.
So in terms of the executive function, I mean, I see several primary areas. One is certainly to propose policy for consideration based on that executive experience, and we've seen that. A big one that I think is clear, there should be clarity, and I don't think there is right now, is on just day-to-day management and direction of city departments. That needs to be made much clearer. There's budget creation, which of course we already have. There's establishing the city's goals and priorities, which in many cases we do jointly. And in most cases, I think there's broad, almost unanimity, and in terms of the values that we want to hold. And then there's also, other cities we've also seen an intergovernmental lead as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And number 4, kind of very similarly focused, is what suggestions would you, and then we'll come back to number 3. What suggestions would you offer to improve the delineation between a legislative council and executive mayor? And please feel free to speak to the handouts that we gave you, which include the summary proposals that we're putting forward, as well as a draft markup of the agenda, of the amendment itself.
Madam Chair, as to what suggestions that I would offer to improve the delineation of the roles and responsibilities in the charter, I mean, I think many of them you're already considering right now, which is to provide additional clarity, especially around the day-to-day function and ensuring that the council is the clear and is the clear legislative authority on issues of policy and ordinance, and the mayor has more clear executive function, especially on day-to-day activities. One issue that I know that you all have addressed is the issue of staff directions and what topic areas can staff directions be passed pursuant to. How are staff directions exclusively built around providing information to enhance the legislative function, or are staff directions are they functioning more as a burden on staff that goes too far to the executive day to day? And then additionally, there's the issue of where staff directions given outside of the council process and to either department heads or individuals that report to department heads could ultimately impede the function by providing diverging direction. And so for instance, if I don't want to give too many specific examples because this could apply to any council, to any mayor, but instances where a council member will outside of the council process direct staff to do something, whether that's in public works or CPED or regulatory services. We often see that, and that direction may diverge from some overarching city goal or platform that we are pursuing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As we look at number 3, which directly references the outline of our initial concepts, the two documents that I just mentioned, what appears to be missing that we should offer, or that we should consider for our amendment? And are there adequate checks and balances? And perhaps we can take these more intentionally individually. So what would you offer that could be missing from our proposal?
I don't know that there are concepts necessarily missing, but what I can talk about is what should be accounted for in any potential amendment, and I don't want to say that it's not accounted for, because in many respects I believe it is, and that's the value of professional administration and the expertise of staff. When granted so much of the focus on who has the authority over what is concentrated on this council versus mayor, and the piece that is largely left out of the equation and shouldn't be is the importance of professional administration and the expertise of staff, and the fact that they are certainly the talent more than I or any elected officials. And so for me, that's a really essential piece that is potentially missing in this greater conversation, in this greater recognition of who our professional staff are, what they do, and their value to the residents of our city. And as mayor, I've really come to see the importance of ensuring that our top administrators are leaders in their respective field. They're leaders in our city, and in many cases, they're national leaders that are getting recruited to go work at the federal government. I mean, that I think is emblematic. What we've seen is emblematic of the fact that we have an extraordinary staff that is deserving of not just putting forward recommendations, but also in many cases being able to run some of these day-to-day activities. And so I think that ability to amplify the role of the professional staff is ultimately very good for the city enterprise and our community. And I would also suggest that maybe the Charter Commission could consider whether the charter should actually list so many of our departments in that I think it could be better to even leave to the council and the mayor, with the advice from department leadership, how to decide sort of organizational structure, because some of that can and does change over time. This is not a topic that I've necessarily delved in deep on, as far as which would be or could be listed in a government structure, but that is an important piece. And on that same line of thinking, as mayor, I've really come to realize that the city coordinator plays a much larger and influential role in the city enterprise. And our city coordinator, as you know, is very much different than a city manager. It's a different form of government. And so I would just encourage you to think about, having that position, about almost thinking about the function of that position as the sort of the city's chief administrative officer. And it could, it could work directly with the mayor on day-to-day administrative operations, to better align around achieving clear results on a day-to-day basis. And there's so many different models that you all could take from. You've got the model of governance structure that's in place in Duluth. And I think that's a good working model, because it really balances the broad legislative and policymaking authority of the council with an elective and executive mayor who's accountable for government performance. There's the model that they have in St. Paul, which provides more clarity in terms of authority as well. Traditionally speaking, and I think I'm probably telling you a lot you're already well aware of, but the traditional weak mayor system is one where the mayor sits as a voting member of the council and has maybe they hold the gavel, and then a city manager perhaps reports to all the council members, including the mayor. The traditional strong mayor system, or stronger mayor system, is one that I pointed out in the previous two examples, and either St. Paul or Duluth, and then you have this very gray and disjointed form, which is what we presently operate under.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interestingly, another attribute for a traditional strong mayor system is a part-time council, which is what Duluth has and what St. Paul has. So that is not, something that we're writing into our proposal, but that's just interesting to note with regard to any emphasis or subtlety for the term strong mayor, which is, I think, why we're looking at an executive mayor.
Madam Chair, I am not advocating for that, to be clear.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Neither are we. Right. So the second part for question 3 is, do you think there are adequate checks and balances between the council and mayor? And would there be any suggestions you would have for checks and balances?
We do have many checks and balances. And I very much appreciate the thought that went into providing additional clarity in terms of authority between the mayor and the council. What I would say is the concept of I believe it's called a prime directive, goes too far. And I do think it has the potential to create a negative divide between the council and the departments. We want interaction. We want collaboration and communication, and I certainly don't want to hinder that in any way, shape, or form. And speaking as someone who previously was a council member and recognizing the importance of that role and the direct contact that so many have had with their constituents, I certainly wouldn't want to hinder that liaison role, which I feel is critical. So while I very much think that the general impulse is fair, I would encourage you to stop short of adopting the Duluth style approach, which includes the penalties legal penalties to the council in any instances of interference. And I haven't heard all the testimony, but I'm assuming that some of my council colleagues have raised similar concerns.
Yes, yes, I believe they have. Do you have anything further? I have a couple of follow-ups.
I don't right now. I'm happy to take the follow-ups though.
One of my follow-up with regard to the checks and balances, and you expressed that perhaps the non-interference clause goes too far. Earlier you mentioned kind of the government performance and an executive mayor overseeing the day-to-day function and reporting. So how do you see the mayor, how do you see the issue with holding the mayor accountable? And how is that, or is that conveyed in our proposal?
Broadly speaking, in many of these day-to-day issues, the mayor is held accountable. And if they are going to be held accountable, it makes sense to have a clear line of authority so that that directive isn't questioned, or at least it can be questioned. It can be questioned. It can always be questioned. But you at least know who is responsible for making that underlying decision. And we don't spend large chunks of time just discussing who has the authority over what. And at times, indisputably, and this is not my opinion, this is based on legal analysis. At times, it is very unclear. And you run into situations where the mayor could make a decision only to get immediately overturned by the council. And that is a disjointed system. It adds to the dysfunctional nature that so many peg city government with. And I don't think it's helpful.
You also touched upon, when you talked about staff direction and topics, the question of how that could be potentially seen as a burden on staff. And you also emphasized the professional administration and the depth of expertise you have. What is your perspective on really equipping the council with the resources necessary to have more capacity and a more full capacity for its legislative roles? For example, we had talked in the proposal about having the city auditor report to the council. And one example is that while the mayor, looking at the executive day-to-day function of the mayor over departments, having oversight, the city council having oversight of the city auditor could then be able to ask the city auditor to look into some of the city operations, that anything that they may wish to have a closer look at.
I think that makes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of the auditor function. I guess the only piece that you would want to properly navigate is the role of the auditor in auditing city operations versus the role, say, of the Civil Rights Department, which also has oversight over many aspects, including the police.
Of course. No, I think what we are looking at is more of performance auditing. For example, if there was a city mandate to say, this is how we shall, for lack of a better example, we shall consider the role of unicorns in all of the, city ordinance and city policy. And the council thinks that the mayor may be hindering a very transparent look at how to consider unicorns in city policy. The city auditor may then do a performance audit or operations audit on where those obstructions might be for that. I think that's more of what we're talking about, as well as providing legislative staff to city council. So the city council may work with not only the city attorney's office in crafting ordinances and crafting policy, but perhaps, as you suggest, with regard to the expertise of city departments, may have more focus on just engaging city departments and really tapping into that expertise as policy is analyzed and determined.
I think I understand what you're saying, Madam Chair, which is enhancing the legislative function for the city council and ensuring that they have the necessary staff and are equipped to address all issues ranging from ordinential policy to unicorns, and right now I'll publicly seek any control over unicorns to the city council. I think that would be fair.
Okay, thank you. Although how anyone could be opposed to unicorns is another conversation.
Yeah. I'll note that this, if we, any move with some of these charter amendments, we should have kind of a full evaluation of what staff look like, because this would be a change to council operations. It would be a change to obviously the mayor's role as well.
Thank you. Before we kind of look at questions from commissioners, is there any other feedback that you have for us that perhaps these questions didn't quite capture, or even anything far afield from the questions?
No, I'm happy to take questions from others at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Abbott.
Yes, thanks very much for appearing today, Your Honor, I guess. We're very formal here. I had essentially two questions, one of which you somewhat addressed with Co-Chair Garcia, which is the question of council staff and resources. I wanted to, one of the things that I've discovered as we've gotten into this, we have kind of an anomalous situation where, the mayor, the current charter actually provides the mayor has a certain minimum staff, including some policy aides, and we have this situation where the council, for its own policy analysis and ordinance drafting, and even to a certain extent of its research, kind of relies on kind of the general city staff, which is kind of over in this kind of administrative stack. And I think as we got into this, I think we're going to definitely need to give the council some authority to get its own some of its own professional staff in order to be able to kind of give it the ability to do policymaking. It's going to need to do a little research on its own and a little drafting on its own. And you seem to be open to that. And I guess that's my question is, do you have any objections to that at all?
No, I don't have objections to it. The only caveat is that, I operated obviously as a council member and as well as a mayor. And the workload, the combined and collective workload for where we're at as staff is definitely significantly higher. As mayor, as the representative of all 13 wards, and dealing with kind of day-to-day executive functions. And so that has obviously been highlighted even further during a time of pandemic where we do in fact have an emergency declaration in place. But I mean, if there is even a further shift to a more permanent and clear executive function, then that would be the case on an ongoing basis. And so I'll just note that if we are changing things around, that we should also look at what staffing levels those other cities have in those respective bodies, being mayor's office and council.
And that seems to me to be the sort of thing that the council and the mayor can, I mean, I don't think we need to write that into the charter, right? I mean, that's the sort of thing you guys can figure out after if this gets enacted.
I would agree. I mean, like I said, I'm not disagreeing with the notion that some additional policy expertise and assistance to the council could be helpful. And I'm sure that my staff, who operated in the council offices and are now working in the mayor's office, I'll note they'll tell you directly significantly more hours. That there's also a difference there. So it's all bodies, the council, the mayor's office, these city departments, they're doing incredibly hard work. And I think the point that you're making, Commissioner Abbott, is that a lot of these decisions don't need to be baked into a charter, and I agree. This charter is very much this as a sacred nature. It's a sacred document in so many respects, and I think that we should find ways to solidify these ongoing legal concepts in the charter while divorcing ourselves from both present personalities or political issues. I mean, this is the charter; it lives on. And certainly changes will be made on an ongoing basis to staffing, both in the mayor's office, the council offices, and departments.
And then the last question I have is Council President Bender yesterday raised the question of implementation. One of the things we really haven't looked at very closely is, what if in fact the voters choose to adopt the proposed amendment, what date would be the best for these changes to take place? And as we look at the calendar, it seems to me there are essentially three options, one of which is immediately. So if the voters adopt this in November of 2021, we could look at starting this on January 1, 2022. Option two would be after the next election, which would be, this kind of odd midterm election we have to do for redistricting in 23. So we could do it in January of 22, January of 24, or after the next general election, where the mayor is also up in November of 25, which would result in like January 1st of 26. And I don't know if you have an opinion as to which of those dates are important. I mean, I do think there obviously should be some transition discussion in the government about how to change the staffing as a result of this. So maybe January 1st, 2022 is a little early, but I'm just curious about your thoughts about timing of implementation.
Commissioner, I think you're right that January 1st, 2022 would be too early. I mean, that would leave us with only, a couple months at most to get an entire new system set up. I could see feasibly getting things set up by 23 or 24. 24 being, I guess, just following that mid-election. 23 or 24, I think, could potentially work better. I mean, this is actually a really good situation where I think we should consult staff that would be in charge of potentially implementing any form of change. And it shouldn't necessarily come from either me nor council members.
Okay. Well, I think we'll consult with our esteemed clerk, Mr. Carl, about that. And thank you for your time. And that's all the questions I have.
Yes, implementation is a very good question, because one issue we're thinking about is how can we best position those who are in office or will be in office? In other words, how can we best position candidates to prepare for this change? And I think doing it, my view is doing it so it's effective in 2022 is just after a municipal election, a city council election is, I mean, the city council candidates are running, then all of a sudden they're met with these changes, and that could be a bit much. So we're really looking at something that is very intentional and well thought out, And like you said, something that the city staff and departments can really plan around. One thing I just want to double check that I heard from you, I know we were kind of mixing some concepts there for a little while, is the whole concept of transparency and clear delineation, and that with regard to the mayor and greater accountability to the mayor for overseeing city departments, having that clear delineation and that clear line would then lend the mayor to be held accountable for the city operations and department management and outcomes. Likewise, having that clear delineation with the council around their legislative function by augmenting their resources, policy staff, city auditor, and such, would provide enhanced clarity and accountability around policy making to the council. Is it fair to say that that is accurate?
You're saying that accountability would be gained through having more clarity? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that, the transparency of mayor over departments and council with policy making.
Oh.
There's more clarity as far as those roles.
I think the answer is yes. If there's a clear delineation, and so that the general public understands who is accountable for what, and elected officials and staff understand who is tasked with providing direction under specific areas, I think, yes, that would certainly help for accountability purposes, because you'd know who to hold accountable.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from work group members or commissioners? Chair Clegg, did you have any words of wisdom from?
Thank you, Chair Garcia. I would just thank the mayor for taking the time to come and talk to us. We really appreciate it. Your comments have been helpful, and I'm sure will be helpful in framing our discussion as we move forward with this, in considering this amendment. So unless there are any other questions from commissioners.
Yeah, let me just say, as the co-chair of this work group, I am also very grateful for the time the mayor's put in today, and obviously the thoughtfulness of the consideration, and both for the mayor and for the council yesterday. I think I have to say I was a little skeptical that the current elected officials would. I was worried this would get caught up in some sort of current politics and some back and forth. But I think everybody has been really thoughtful, and one of the things that we try to do here is this is a charter amendment that's supposed to last for decades, and and we need to really kind of get our heads out of the current environment. And I think both the council and the mayor have done a very good job of kind of talking to the larger issues, and I'm deeply appreciative of that, and I'd like to extend my thanks to that on behalf of the work group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Madam Chair, for that matter. And I'll make sure to pass the appreciation on to my colleagues as well. I appreciate them, our council members, to staff. The fact that we're engaging in this discussion in a really thoughtful way, I think, is really helpful for the public. And so I very much appreciate, commissioners, all your work.
And I think both you as the mayor and the council kind of not being a fan of the non-interference clause, I think that also kind of speaks to the longevity and the legs that the charter's intended to have, rather than any particular past or present situation. If there's nothing further, then I believe we've concluded the business to come before the government structure work group of the Charter Commission. And if there are no objections, we stand adjourned.